Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something really exciting. We are summarizing the absolute best methods and actionable tips for learning a new language. We're diving deep into the actual science of how your brain picks up a language, and from that, we're going to map out the ultimate roadmap to fluency. So, if you ever wanted all the top language hacks in one place, you're in exactly the right spot.
Let's kick things off with a question that honestly frustrates so many of us. Why on earth does learning a new language feel completely impossible for some people, but, almost effortless for others? Is it just some rare natural talent, or is there an actual specific blueprint to how successful learners build their skills? To answer that, we're taking a theory-to-practice approach today. We'll quickly cover 5 main areas. First, how we actually acquire language, then overcoming common learning mistakes, followed by active and passive immersion, modern tools and strategies, and finally, how to build your own study ecosystem.
All right, diving right into part 1, how we acquire language, or the science of fluency. Let's look at the foundational cognitive science of how our brains learn to communicate. Because, well, if we don't understand the machinery, we really can't operate it properly.
For decades, academics actually argued over how this whole process works. Early behaviorist theories, think researchers like Skinner and Pavlov, they argue that language is built from a total blank slate. Basically, it's all imitation, repetition, and reinforcement. You hear a sound, you copy it, you get a reward. Sounds logical, right? But is that really the whole story?
Well, not quite. Scholars like Noam Chomsky completely countered that idea. He proposed something called the language acquisition device. Chomsky suggested our brains aren't just blank slates at all. Instead, we are naturally, physically hardwired with an innate capability to understand and organize language right from birth. It's like the software is already pre-installed. Building right on those ideas, linguist Stephen Krashen made a super important distinction. He separated the acquired system from the learned system. See, the acquired system is totally subconscious and natural. It's exactly how you picked up your native language as a kid. The learned system, though, that's the formal, rule-based textbook studying we all remember from high school. And Krashen argues that true fluency, it comes from the acquired system, not the learned one.
So that begs the big question. How do we actually activate that acquired system? Well, according to Krashen, true acquisition happens when we receive what he calls comprehensible input. It's famously represented by this little formula, I plus 1. I is your current skill level, and the plus 1 means the material you're exposing yourself to is just one step beyond that. It needs to be challenging enough to stretch you, but understandable enough that you don't just get completely lost and give up. Moving on to part 2, overcoming common learning mistakes. What holds us back? I mean, if our brains are already wired to acquire language through this comprehensible input, why do so many of us hit a massive wall and just fail?
Often, it's just because we stumble into a few very specific, super common traps. The biggest ones, setting wildly unrealistic goals. Like saying, I'm going to be perfectly fluent in 3 months. We also struggle with a lack of consistent daily practice. Oh, and the huge trap of obsessing over perfect grammar instead of just trying to actually communicate.
Seriously, if you've ever found yourself totally frustrated just staring at endless verb conjugation charts, you are completely justified. Like Krashen points out, true acquisition prioritizes meaningful interaction, not tedious, boring drills. If your goal is everyday communication, making friends, or traveling, obsessing over strict academic grammar is actually going to slow you down.
But beyond the grammar obsession, there's also the emotional side. Krashen identifies this thing called the affective filter. Think of it as a literal mental block created by anxiety, low motivation, or perfectionism. If your affective filter is high, like maybe you're terrified of sounding silly or making a mistake, that comprehensible input physically cannot reach the language centers of your brain. Literally, you have to relax if you want to learn. All right, part 3, active and passive immersion. Let's talk about engaging the brain. Now that we know we absolutely need comprehensible input and a relaxed mindset, how do we properly immerse ourselves without totally burning out in a week?
To pull this off, we have to draw a hard line between active listening and passive listening. Active listening is highly intensive. You're fully dialed in, you're pausing the audio, looking up unknown words, and frankly, it burns through your mental energy fast. Passive listening, on the other hand, is extensive. It's just having the language playing in the background, washing over you to reinforce what you already know, while you're, say, doing the dishes or driving to work.
A great strategy is to actively study challenging stuff, like a tough new podcast or a textbook chapter, first thing,
when your brain is totally fresh. Then you can take that exact same content, or maybe throw on some culturally rich movies or music, and use that as passive background reinforcement later in the day. Actually, music is incredibly powerful here. The melodies work like a memory hack, and repeating the lyrics naturally trains your pronunciation without it feeling like work.
Which brings us to part 4, modern tools and strategies. This is where technology meets theory. Let's pivot from the concepts to the actual tools we have today and see how modern tech perfectly lines up with these cognitive needs.
Recent academic research looking into English proficiency really highlights the incredible power of blended learning. We don't have to rely entirely on those old-school grammar translation methods anymore. Instead, we can dive into task-based language teaching, which is basically using the language to solve real, practical problems.
In today's modern language apps and digital platforms, they are absolutely brilliant at hitting all our learning needs. They tackle our cognitive needs using spaced repetition algorithms. They lower that stressful affective filter we talked about through gamification and fun, low-stakes rewards. Plus, they satisfy our social needs by connecting us through language exchanges or even virtual reality. It just proves that technology can beautifully deliver that I+1 input we need.
Finally, part 5. Building your study ecosystem and the power of habit stacking. Let's talk about the daily, practical execution, because let's be real, all this theory is totally useless if you can't actually get yourself to sit down and practice. So how do we apply this without relying entirely on pure willpower? The secret here is a brilliant concept called habit stacking. Instead of trying to force a massive, intimidating 2-hour study block into your schedule, you take an existing automatic anchor habit, something you do every day without fail, like boiling water for your morning coffee, and you attach a tiny, super low-friction micro-study touchpoint right to it. By building a sequential habit stack, a giant, scary goal suddenly transforms into an automated routine. Check this out. You wake up, you make coffee. While that coffee is brewing, you quickly review 10 flashcards on your phone. Right after the flashcards, you read a short text in your target language for like 5 minutes. One habit seamlessly triggers the very next one. Before you know it, you've got a solid 20-minute morning routine that flows with absolutely zero decision fatigue. And when you sprinkle these tiny habits across your whole day, you build this amazing, self-reinforcing, spaced practice cycle. You do your active retrieval with flashcards in the morning. Then you encode new information by writing a quick one-sentence summary of a podcast after lunch. Finally, you consolidate everything with a simple 5-minute mental recall right before you brush your teeth at night. When you set it up like this, learning literally becomes the path of least resistance.
Because at the end of the day, consistency does a lot more than just build language skills. It builds a lifelong learner identity. You actually stop being someone who has to study, and you evolve into someone who just does. So, thinking about your own daily routine right now, what tiny micro habit are you going to start stacking today to finally unlock that new language?